Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is James and welcome back to Soundline. Today's video is on the Accuphase PS 550. Let's get into it and hope you enjoy the video. So this is a power conditioner. It has a great big transformer on the inside of it, which is essentially a one-to-one transformer. Some people call that a regenerator or a sine wave generator or a power conditioner. There are a lot of different terms you can use to describe this, but in a nutshell, all that really matters is that there is a big difference between the level of distortion on the sine wave that comes into this unit versus what comes out of this unit. So on the back here, I've got 3 New Zealand mains outlets that I can use to plug my amplifier and my CD player and maybe a phono stage or something into. And that way I can provide those devices, those audio equipment components, with a better quality 50 Hertz sine wave. We're talking quite small actual differences here. I can show you on the screen the differences between the sine wave coming in and coming out, because this effectively has quite a really highly accurate oscilloscope on it so that you can see that wave, and it measures the difference in the distortion what's coming in versus what's going out. The numbers don't seem to be like that big. We're talking like 2-3% sort of thing. But having listened just now to the amplifier and the CD player plugged into this versus not plugged into this might be my new favorite HiFi accessory component because it makes such a difference to the sound. Okay, so the buttons on the right hand side of the unit going from left to right, I'm just going to run through each of them and show you kind of what they are displaying and what they show on this liquid crystal display here. The display button on the very left, that's pretty simple. It just turns the display off, so if you want to listen and not have anything on the display in a nice dark room, you can. On the left hand side, volt ampere. So if I have this one highlighted, it says volt ampere at the bottom, and the needle, you are looking in the middle section of numbers on this range of numbers here. So you see at the right hand side it says VA. So volt ampere at the moment with the integrated and the CD player plugged into it, it's drawing roughly, I'd say, about 300 volt amps. If I go to the input section, now this says voltage below it, so input and output voltage. Input, the needle, you're looking at the bottom row for V, so it's gone up to about 230. Input and output are basically identical. So we do have good input voltage going into the system at the moment, and so it doesn't really need to change it much. The next section is on distortion. This is a big one. So if I hit input, you can see that the input distortion, we're now looking at the top section of numbers, so percentage of distortion, we look at the top number where it says percentage. We've got about 2.3, 2.4% input distortion. If I hit the output button, that needle goes all the way down to 0, so there is essentially 0 output distortion. And that can be visualized on these last 2 set of buttons here. So these last 2 here show the waveform, the incoming AC signal waveform and the outgoing. So if we look at the incoming, okay, so there's your 50 Hertz sine wave, but if you just look at the very crest and the trough of it, you can see that maybe slightly more so at the crest than what at the trough, but even so, both of them are quite chopped off and flat, and the line leading up to the crest is a wee bit wiggly and, not very smooth. Compare that to the output waveform. It's much smoother, and the crest and trough are perfectly curved and balanced and matching one another. So I'll just switch between the input and output a couple of times. There's the input, there's the output. It's a subtle difference, but if you look closely at the line, you can actually see the difference in the perfection of that line. If I flip it around the back here, you can see this has got on it 3 outlets. They came, I think, with a different outlet on it, like maybe a Singaporean outlet, but we get these modified by an authorized technician to have New Zealand outlets put on them. And then it's got a 10 amp power inlet there. But there's not too much to see back here, it's just 3 standard outlets and a standard inlet. You'll notice on the back here above these outlets, it says max 400 VA. it is worth saying you can't just put the biggest, most powerful amplifier you want on here. This does have a current limit of how much power this can provide to a bunch of devices. So depending on your system, you may choose to use this device just to provide clean power to your preamp and your CD player and your phono stage, for instance. Or if you have a relatively small system like what I just tested this on with just a CD player and an amp that is not too hungry, this could potentially do that. I use this on the Accuphase E700, which is a 70 watt Class A integrated amplifier, as well as the DP570 SA CD player. And we were drawing, I think, what did I say? It was around about 300 volt amp. So we were using about 3/4 of its potential capacity. If you have a really powerful amplifier that you would like to run on one of these systems, there is a model above this called the PS1250, which has got, I think, 800 volt amps of capacity. Real quick PSA, you can't just go whacking a 2 kilowatt amplifier on this power supply because this won't be able to provide enough current to power all of that. I just want to talk to you guys about what this does for the sound, because I just plugged this in. We've had it plugged in and running in, for the last week or so, trying to get some hours on it so that it's all relatively warm and as run in as it possibly can be. And I've obviously been listening to the system, but I haven't been doing like any critical listening and doing direct comparisons. But I just sat down and did a direct comparison listening to the system with the CD player and the amp plugged into this versus not plugged into this. So we already have a Nordost QB8 Mark III power distribution system, which I love, and I know that it on its own makes a big difference. So I listened to it on that, and then I simply plugged this into that QB8 and plugged the CD player amp into the back of this. So put this in line with that. First thing I noticed, the bass was reduced, right? Now, when I say reduced, that doesn't mean, oh no, the bass is gone. Why is there no bass? The boominess of the bass was reduced, so it sounded less bloated and overdone. I didn't move the speakers around in the room at all. It didn't change the amount of power I had. The volume on the amp was the exact same, but the bass was cleaned up and tighter, and where there needed to be fast, punchy bass, there was, and where there needed to be really deep extension, there was. Before, I guess not really knowing it, when I wasn't using this, the bass was cloudy. The next thing I noticed, and possibly the biggest, was that the speakers, the Sonos Faber Amati G5s, which are big powerful speakers, they just completely disappeared from the room, and it sounded like just the whole room and the whole wall was the source of the sound. It sounded like I was listening to Roger Waters and his band playing in the room. It was so impressive. The holographicness of the sound improved. What I mean by that is the three-dimensionality of the soundstage got better, 5-10-fold. It was just, the sound was coming from outside the speakers, the sound was coming from above the speakers, behind the speakers. I could hear the individual locations of all the different band members, right down to the difference between the cymbal and the hi-hat being left or right. Absolutely incredible, this machine. I think if you have the ability to listen to one of these, or if you're in Christchurch and you want to come down and see what this does to a good sound system, I highly recommend you do so, because it's absolutely just blown me away, and I can't wait to start showing this to people. Ask me any questions you want in the comments, guys. As I say, I'm not an electrical engineer. I may not be able to answer all of them, but I'll do my best. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you in the next one, hopefully. Ka kite anō.